Hey, Pop, my eggs are cold. The voice came through the service window with the particular carrying quality of someone who has decided, before the sentence is finished, that it's going to be funny. The speaker was Petty Officer 3rd Class Marcus Webb. Different Webb. No relation to the man at the grill, 22 years old. Recently assigned to Naval Station Norfolk, who was sitting in the third booth from the window at Dolores's Diner on East Little Creek Road with two other sailors who were at the same stage of their careers and who were responding to the comment with the specific encouragement of an audience that has decided to let the loudest person in the group speak for all of them. The diner was 12 minutes from the gate of Naval Station Norfolk, and it was 6:30 on a Tuesday morning, and the breakfast rush was the breakfast rush, not the civilian breakfast rush, the military breakfast rush, which means it starts at 5:30 and runs fast and loud, and the people eating it are hungry in a specific way that civilian hunger does not quite replicate. The eggs were not cold. The man at the grill could see the steam. Hey, Webb's voice climbed a register. He tapped the empty coffee cup on the table. You gonna bring the carafe out? Or do I have to come back there and get it myself? A beat. Then to his companions, no wonder this place is dead on a Tuesday. Slowest old man in Norfolk. The old man at the grill did not respond. He was 76 years old, and his name was Clarence Wendell Webb, still no relation. He had checked the young sailor's name tape when he came in, with the brief, automatic attention of a man who has spent his adult life noting names, and he had been working the morning shift at Dolores's Diner on East Little Creek Road for 11 years, 6 days a week, which was approximately the same number of years and days and early mornings he had spent on active duty in the United States Navy between 1969 and 1993, give or take the 43 days he had spent in a military hospital in 1982 that he did not count, and that he did not discuss with anyone who had not already been told about them. He was wearing a white cook's apron over a gray t-shirt, a paper cap that he replaced every Tuesday because paper caps lost their shape after a week and he preferred them with their shape, and the same expression he wore every morning, which was the expression of a man who is doing what he came here to do and who does not require the people around him to make it easier. He was tall, had always been tall. 6'2", which had made the F-14 Tomcat cockpit a specific exercise in configuration that he had solved once and never had to solve again. The way certain problems, once solved correctly, stay solved. He was lean in the way that men are lean when they have never stopped moving, when the stillness they carry is the stillness of something contained rather than something at rest. His eyes were the particular gray of overcast at altitude, not dark, not bright, but present. The kind of eyes that register everything without appearing to register anything. The occupational eyes of a man who spent 24 years reading an instrument panel and a horizon simultaneously, and for whom the habit of precise, distributed attention had become indistinguishable from his resting state. His hands on the grill spatula were large and precise. The kind of hands that pilots develop from hours of maintaining instrument pressure. Not delicate, but calibrated to a tolerance that civilian hands rarely achieve, and that does not leave even when the instrument is a spatula and the cockpit is a short-order kitchen in Norfolk, Virginia. He slid the eggs onto the plate. He added the toast. He put the carafe on the counter and pushed it through the window without comment. He went back to the grill. My man, Webb said, behind him, to the two other sailors, I've seen faster service at an embassy gate. Another laugh. Bet he was somebody's grandpa before this. Probably used to be real important. He pitched his voice toward the window. Hey, Pop, what'd you do before you came here? What's your story? From the booth near the door, a woman looked up from her coffee. Her name was Anita Dominguez. She was 61 years old, recently retired after 30 years as a Master Chief Petty Officer in the United States Navy, most of it in aviation squadrons. She was eating breakfast alone because she was visiting a daughter, stationed at Norfolk, and her daughter had a 600 shift, and breakfast had been Anita's idea for a reason that had less to do with food and more to do with the particular quality of peace that a military town diner at 6:30 in the morning offers to someone who spent 30 years in military towns and finds them still comfortable in the way of things that have always been home. She had not been paying attention to the sailors in the third booth until the last exchange. Now she was paying attention. She was paying attention because of the man at the grill. She had been looking at him in the background of her awareness since she sat down, looking the way she had always looked at people in aviation spaces, which was with the habit of pattern recognition that 30 years of working alongside aviators builds into a person. There was something in the way the man at the grill moved. Something in the way he stood. Not the military bearing exactly, he wasn't performing posture, but something underneath the bearing, the substrate that the bearing comes from, the quality of attention and precision and contained capability that does not leave a person when they leave the service, that becomes structural. She had been trying to place it. She had not been able to place it. She had been about to let it go. She did not let it go now. She looked at the old man at the grill. She looked at his hands on the spatula. She looked at the height, the economy of movement, the particular quality of his stillness. A thought arrived in her mind that was not a conclusion yet, but was adjacent to one. She thought about her second tour at VF-84, the Jolly Rogers, 1989 through 1991. She thought about the wing commander who had told the squadron, in a briefing she had attended as a maintenance chief, about a landing that had happened 8 years before, in 1981, over the North Atlantic, that should not have been survivable, and that was. She thought about the name that the wing commander had used when he told the story. She looked at the man at the grill. She looked at him for 30 seconds. Then she said, quietly, to no one in particular, in the voice of someone testing the accuracy of a thought rather than making an announcement, Lazarus. The word was not loud. It did not need to be. It had the quality of certain words in certain contexts that expand to fill whatever space they are spoken into, the way a specific frequency fills a room, regardless of volume. It was a word that meant something specific in naval aviation, had meant something specific since 1981 when it was first used, and had continued to mean that specific thing in the decades since, accumulating weight with each retelling, each training briefing, each instructor who used it as the name for a category of impossible situation that had nevertheless been resolved. A Lazarus situation. That's a Lazarus. Do what Lazarus did. The call sign had outlived its original context and become a teaching tool, which was the highest form of immortality that naval aviation offers. A moment, it becomes a standard. The 3 sailors in the third booth had heard the word. They were young enough to be uncertain of its reference, and experienced enough to know that uncertainty in this context was a signal. One of them, the one who had not been the loudest, straightened slightly in his seat. The loudest one, Marcus Webb, had stopped speaking. He was looking at Anita Dominguez with the expression of someone who has recognized that the room has changed quality but has not yet determined how. "Ma'am," he said. Anita looked at him. She said, "Do you know what that name means?" Webb looked at his companions. Neither of them offered anything. "No, ma'am." In 1981, Anita said in the same quiet, even voice, an F-14 Tomcat over the North Atlantic experienced simultaneous dual-engine failure at 31,000 feet. The aircraft was 6 minutes from the carrier on a routine intercept return. The Rio ejected per emergency procedure. The pilot did not eject. He brought the aircraft down from 31,000 feet on one partially restored engine in deteriorating weather at night, and he landed it on the carrier. At night. In weather. On a single damaged engine. The nose gear collapsed on touchdown because the aircraft had taken damage that the pilot had not had time to fully assess during the descent. The airframe was destroyed on deck. The pilot walked away. She set her coffee cup down precisely. The event was classified for 6 years. When it was declassified, the Naval Aviation Schools Command incorporated it into the emergency procedures curriculum. It is used specifically in the context of decision-making under catastrophic failure, what you do when the options are reduced to none and you have to generate an option that doesn't exist yet. The case study has one title: The Pilot's Call Sign. She looked at the service window. Lazarus, because he came back from something you don't come back from. That name has been used in naval aviation training for 40 years. Pilots who have never met him fly with that name in their heads. Instructors use it as a verb. That's a Lazarus situation. Do what Lazarus did. The name is not his anymore. It belongs to the curriculum. It belongs to every pilot who has ever sat in a cockpit and faced a configuration that the book says is unsurvivable and has had to decide what to do anyway. She paused. He's been flipping burgers 11 blocks from Naval Station Norfolk for 11 years, and nobody knew his name. The diner was quiet in the way of a space where everyone present has stopped generating ambient noise simultaneously, which is a different kind of quiet from the quiet of an empty space. The cook at the other end of the counter, a 24-year-old named Terrence, who had worked mornings at Dolores's for 8 months, and who knew Clarence Webb as the man who came in at 5:15 and had the grill hot by 5:30, and who made the best hash browns he had ever eaten, and who never talked about himself, was looking at the service window with an expression that suggested rapid internal revision of a model he had held for 8 months. From the kitchen came the sound of the grill. It was a specific sound, the particular sizzle of fat on cast iron that a short-order cook learns to read the way a pilot learns to read instruments, as information, as data about what is happening and what needs to happen next. The sound was the sound of the grill working, which was the sound of Clarence Webb's morning continuing in its established way. Because Clarence Webb did not know that his call sign had just been spoken in the diner, and the grill did not know either, and the Tuesday morning breakfast orders did not stop arriving simply because the room had changed quality. But for Clarence, in the moment before the sound brought him back, the sizzle had taken him somewhere else. The sound of the grill, fat on cast iron, high and specific, was close enough to the sound of a Phoenix missile rack cycling in test mode that it found a frequency in him that had not been accessed in a long time. The particular auditory alert of a Tomcat's weapons system running its sequence. A sound he had lived with for 24 years in enough cockpits and enough maintenance bays that his body still held it as information. The sound delivered him, for a fraction of a second, to a cockpit. Not the 1981 cockpit, a different one. Earlier, 1973, over the Gulf of Tonkin, altitude 18,000 feet. The particular quality of the stick in his hands at altitude. The specific geometry of the canopy view at that height. The way the horizon curved at the edge of your peripheral vision when you were high enough for the curvature to become visible, which was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen in his life, and which he had seen approximately 600 times, and which had not once failed to produce in him the specific response of a man encountering something that his nervous system recognized as correct, as the place where the specific shape of what he was matched the specific shape of what was required of him. He had loved the airplane. He had loved it the way you love something you know will eventually end, with the precision that comes from knowing the time is finite, with the honesty that comes from not pretending it will last. The 1981 airplane had been Bureau number 159615, and it had been a good airplane, and it had carried him through 117 flight hours, and it had failed at 31,000 feet over the North Atlantic in a configuration that the engineering specifications described as unrecoverable, and he had not accepted the specifications. He had not accepted them because the Rio was already out and the airplane was still moving, and something moving can be guided, and something that can be guided can be landed, and something that can be landed can be survived, and those were not calculations but a sequence, and the sequence was the whole of what he had to work with, and he had worked with it. The airframe had not survived. He had been making peace with that order ever since, with the specific variety of peace that is not resolution but coexistence. The decision to carry the weight of surviving without allowing the weight to be the only thing you carry. He had made his peace with this in the way that men make peace with the things they cannot change. Not by achieving peace, exactly, but by deciding that the debt incurred by surviving was payable in the specific currency of continuing to show up. He had shown up. For 24 more years of active service, and then for 11 years of 6-day-a-week morning shifts at Dolores's Diner on East Little Creek Road, with the paper cap replaced every Tuesday and the hash browns made correctly, and the grill hot by 5:30. He slid a plate under the heat lamp and turned to the next order. He came out through the swinging door with 2 plates, the eggs that Marcus Webb had called cold 7 minutes ago, and a short stack for the table behind them. He set down the plates. He looked at the booth. 3 sailors, all of them looking at him with expressions that he read, in the fraction of a second available for reading expressions while distributing plates, as something other than the expressions they had been wearing when they came in. He could not determine the specific nature of the change. He went back through the swinging door. After the rush, Anita Dominguez came to the counter. She sat on a stool. She waited until Clarence came out with the coffee. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He looked at her. He looked at her the way he looked at most people who asked him things, with the attention of someone who has learned that the quality of a question usually tells you what the answer should be. "Ask," he said. "I called you Lazarus," she said, "about 40 minutes ago." I said the name out loud. Those sailors heard it. Clarence was quiet for a moment. He refilled her cup. He set the carafe down. "I served in aviation for 30 years, Anita said. VF-84, among others. I heard the story. I recognized," she paused. "I recognized the way you move. I recognized something in the way you stand. I should have kept it to myself. I didn't." Clarence looked at her. He appeared to be running some interior accounting. Then he said, "That name belongs to the airplane." He said it simply, without drama, the way he would have said the eggs are on the left side of the board. Bureau number 159615. She didn't come home from that landing. I did. The name is hers. Anita looked at him for a moment. She had the expression of someone who has heard something that she expected to be a deflection and has found it to be accurate. "I think the pilots who came after you might see it differently," she said. "Then they should give it to their airplane," Clarence said. He picked up the carafe. He looked down the counter at the next cup that needed filling. "You want anything else?" She did not. She left a $20 tip on the $7 bill and did not make a point of it. Because making a point of it would have been the wrong kind of recognition, and she understood, after 40 minutes at Dolores's Diner on a Tuesday morning, what kind of recognition was and was not available here. The following Tuesday, Marcus Webb came back alone. He sat at the counter, not the third booth, the counter, at 6:15, which was before the rush. He ordered the same thing he had ordered the previous week: eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee. Clarence made it. He set it down. He refilled the coffee without being asked. Webb looked at the plate. He looked up. He said, "The 1981 landing. How did you decide not to eject?" Clarence looked at him. He was quiet for a moment in the way he was quiet when the question was one that had an actual answer, and the answer required a certain amount of care. The Rio was out, he said. The airplane was still flying. Barely, but flying. He poured his own coffee. He set the carafe down. If something is still flying, you stay with it. That's the whole of it. Webb was quiet. He ate his eggs. He finished his coffee. He left the correct change plus $6 and didn't make a point of that either. He came back the following Tuesday. And the one after that. He never asked another question about the landing. He had understood, somewhere in the interval between the first Tuesday and the second, that the question had been answered completely, and that the answer was not about a landing. They are in the diners, and the hardware stores, and the back rooms of places that don't advertise their connection to what was done in them. They flip burgers, and they make the hash browns correctly, and they replace the paper cap every Tuesday, and they have the grill hot by 5:30, because the grill being hot by 5:30 is the correct version of the task, and they do not do the incorrect version of things. They don't tell you who they are. They don't need to. The work is what they do, and the work is what they are, and the call sign, if it still applies, belongs to the airplane that carried them and the mission that required them, and not to the man who walked away. Because walking away was not the achievement. The flying was the achievement. And the flying belongs to the aircraft and the crew and the sky and all of the people who came after and used the name to find their way through their own unsurvivable configurations. That is what Clarence Webb meant when he said the name belongs to the airplane. Not modesty. Accuracy, the airplane flew. He guided it. The guiding was necessary, and the guiding was his. But the name belongs to the whole of it, and he is only the part that is still here to tell the difference. The ones who show up every Tuesday at 6:15 and sit at the counter instead of the third booth, who come back not because they have to, but because something in them understood that the silence at the counter is a different silence from the silence of mockery, and that the different silence is where something real can happen. Those are the ones who learn what Clarence Webb knew from the moment the engine failed at 31,000 feet, that the only response to an unsurvivable situation is to find the thing that is still flying and stay with it. Stay with what is still flying. That is the whole of it. That is everything. If this story moved you, if you understand that the ones who walk away from the things they can't survive are the ones still showing up at 5:15 every morning to make it right, hit that like button. Share this with someone who knows what that cockpit costs. And subscribe to Veterans Valor, where every story is a debt we owe and a name we should know.